prayer is the communication between humanity and what? And divinity. You are the human, he is the divine. So when the both of you begin to communicate, it is said to be that you are what? Praying. When last did you communicate with divinity? What is prayer? Prayer is the place where pride is abandoned, hope is lifted, and supplication is made. When we talk about prayer, in prayer place, there's not supposed to be pride in you. We see people, when we come to a place of prayer, they try to listen. When you really understand prayer, if it takes you to lie down, you will lie down. If it takes you to kneel down, you will kneel down. If it takes you to stand up, you will stand up. What matters is that communication should be made between humanity and divinity. If you hear me say, I hear you. Prayer is the needful practice of the Christians. Prayer is the exercise of faith and hope. What is faith? The Bible says faith is the substance of things hoped for and the evidence of things not seen. So when we talk about the exercise of faith and hope, we are talking about calling those things that were not as though they were. Prayer is manufacturing things that have never been created. What is prayer? Prayer is the privilege of touching the heart of the Father. Look at James chapter 4 verse 8. Prayer is the privilege of touching the heart of the Father. Anytime you pray, you touch the heart of the Father. And don't forget that every father knows the children's voice, true of us. And whenever a father hears that the child is crying, what is the first thing that comes to mind? The father wants to know, who is beating my child? The Bible says, draw near to God and he will draw near to you. Cleanse your heart, ye sinners, and purify your heart, ye double what? Minded. So prayer draw you nearer to God. Prayer is drawing nearer to God. If you hear me say, I hear you. There's a man called E.D. Ole. He said something. He said, wishing will never be a substitute for prayers. Wishing will never be a substitute for prayers. Oh, I wish this situation would change. Oh, I wish this thing never happened. Oh, I wish I would just be. Oh, I wish I would be this. Wishing will never be a substitute for what? For prayers. John G. Lake said, there is a mighty lot of difference between saying prayers and praying. There's a mighty lot of difference between saying prayers and what? And praying. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. You are saying prayer, you are not praying. Because when you are praying, there's a communication. I wish somebody is hearing me. When you are praying, there's a response, there's a communication. Communication is when you talk, I hear you, I talk, you hear me. When we are not understanding each other, when there is no exchange of information, there is no communication. So there's a difference between saying prayers and what? And praying. Let me show you something in 1 John chapter 5, verse 14 and 15. 1 John chapter 5 verse 14 and 15. And this is the confidence that we have in him, that if we ask anything according to his will, he do what? He heareth us. And if we know that he heareth us, whatsoever we ask, we know that we have what? We have what? The petition that we desired of him. Have you gotten to that point? Have you gotten to that point in your life where you asked for something and he answered you? McGregor said something. He said, I would rather train 20 men to pray than train 1,000 men to preach. These are men who understand the importance of prayer. The reason why so many cannot sustain success is because their prayer life is dry. Their prayer life is dead. They have what it takes to establish, but they don't have what it takes to sustain. Let me tell you something. As Christian or as a child of God, as a believer, the only guarantee of your tomorrow is your prayer life. If you hear me say, I hear you. But it's so painful that the prayer life of many people are dead. The prayer life of many people are dead. We don't understand that we should live a life of prayer because the world we are in is a wicked place. There are people who don't want you alive. There are people who want to do everything to wipe you out. There are people who are angry that you are making it. And the only way you can sustain and the only way you can overcome them is by living a prayerful life. If you hear me, say I hear you. Ladies and gentlemen, you must understand that there is power in prayers. You must understand that prayer has the capacity to close the door against your enemy. Prayer has the capacity to silence the voice of your enemy. Prayer has the capacity to take you above those who are trying to bring you down. Prayer has the capacity to make you become invisible in the presence of your enemy. If you hear me, say I hear you. Men may turn down your appeals, reject our message, oppose our argument, despise our person, but they are helpless when we render prayers. Because our prayer is what goes through without their permission. Jonas prayed, and Queen Mary said, I fear the prayer of Jonas more than the 10,000 armies of Scotland. What have your prayer done in your life? Until there is an evidence of your prayer in your life, you have not prayed. If you hear me, say I hear you. How dare you call yourself a mother? You are not a prostitute. Your husband is not a womanizer. Your only daughter is not akunakuna. Something is wrong somewhere. How dare you call yourself a mother and yet you are not a thief? Your husband is not an armed robber. Your only son is a cultist. You didn't do your work as a parent. You didn't do your work as a parent. It reminds me of a woman called Susanna Wesley. She brought all her children up by herself. Susanna will spend 2 hours every day for prayer. 1 hour to pray for her children and 1 hour to pray for her spiritual life. She ended up becoming one of the best mothers who grew and who raised up 2 children that were so prominent on earth that up to today we still feed their imparts. She became the mother of John Wesley and who? Charles Wesley. These are people who amounted to a great figure. Why? Because they have a praying mother. Susanna Wesley, anytime the children saw her wear a prayer mantle, everybody knows that it's time to pray. People testify that there's a certain season in that woman's life, a certain time. If you pass through her house, because she was not having much, they were not rich, they were not wealthy. The only thing she had was prayer. So if you pass through her house that certain season, you will see her kneel down and the children will surrender and she will be praying for them. Why will those children not become great? When last did you pray for your child? That your son you say is not doing well in school. Was that child like that? Initially, that child was a star. What happened? You are not asking questions. When last did you pray for that your daughter? Oh, my daughter is following me. It's following me. My daughter is doing runs. When last did you pray for that your daughter? Don't you know that there are people who don't want that daughter to amount to something else? Don't you know that there can be manipulation in the lives of our children? Don't you know that there are people who have remote control, who can remote your children from being the good person to being the bad person? Don't you know that the character can be worn into your child? When last did you pray for that your son? When last did you pray for that your daughter? When last did you lay your hands on your son and say, any arrow sent to you, I return it to sender? When last did you take that child to God in prayers? You want to have a good son and yet you can't be a good prayer model. You are joking. Let me tell you something. Children can be spoiled. Write it down. What did I say? Children can be spoiled. It is not everyone who has spoiled today that has spoiled naturally. Majority of these children are spoiled because of jealousy. How will your child be attending a good school when their own could not even afford it, when they could not even afford the government school for their child? And they call you, you call them their cousin? You went to greet them to tell them, oh, my child just got a scholarship. He wants to go and school in Harvard. In Harvard. When his own cannot even school in Unibe. Oh, Kalabaladayadaba. Your child that left home a very good boy, only for him to be coming back from that holiday, you see Yeri in his ears. Say, Daddy, yeah, ma, yeah, ma, yeah, ma. Oh, yeah, ma, yeah, ma, yeah, ma. You are saying, Obina, where is this? Say, yeah, ma, you got an alcada, yeah, ma. You don't know that there is somebody who has gone to somewhere. John Wesley prayed down the revival of England. Jonathan Edwards prayed and revival came into his own nation. When last did you pray for your children? Ladies and gentlemen, if we don't live a life of prayer, things that give us joy can be cut off. I wish I'm talking to somebody here right now.